Yeah, hello, welcome to the 2021 Urban Tree Festival. My name is Greg Packman. I'm probably off screen at the moment because we've got the ancient tree inventory as our main screen. But I'll be the host of the afternoon, and I'm one of the organisers of the Urban Tree Festival. The Urban Tree Festival is a celebration of all things urban trees, their benefits and their beauty, their majesty and their magic. The festival seeks to connect tree lovers and tree newcomers alike to their local urban trees, connecting people to each other and to share tree knowledge far and wide. The festival runs until Sunday the 23rd with a wide range of fantastic and inspiring events, which you can find on our website, an event listing which should be in the chat box. The festival is run and organised by volunteers, and although we are very kindly supported by organisations such as the Woodland Trust who are delivering this presentation today, other groups like the Greater London Authority, Trees for Cities and the Tree Council, we're very reliant upon donations to help us deliver the festival. So a big thank you to anyone who has donated. It does so much for us to help us deliver the festival sort of bigger and better each year. But anyone who can donate, it is just always immensely appreciated. So I'm very excited to introduce our speaker for this afternoon's event, which is going to be on recording ancient trees. And our speaker is Tom Reed. Tom is the Woodland Trust's Citizen Science Officer for the Ancient Tree Inventory and joined the Trust in 2019, overseeing the delivery of the project and coordinates a national network of volunteer verifiers that play a crucial role in recording and verifying trees to the inventory. Just a couple of quick points on housekeeping. We're in the meeting format today rather than the webinar. So if you could please make sure that your microphones are on mute, that would be great to avoid any disruptions to Tom's talk. We're also recording this webinar, which means that undoubtedly you'll want to watch this again afterwards. But if you don't wish to appear on screen, please turn your camera off as well. I'll be monitoring the chat box, so please keep your questions, well, it's the only place you can put your questions, but please do feel free to ask Tom any questions that you'd like. Yeah, so I'll pass over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Greg, for that fantastic introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us for this afternoon's talk about the Ancient Tree Inventory. As Greg says, I'm the Ancient Tree Inventory Citizen Science Officer at the Woodland Trust, and I sort of oversee all aspects of the delivery of the project. I've been working with the Woodland Trust since August 2019 on this project, and it's an absolutely incredible project. I'm really excited to tell you about it. The Woodland Trust are also, very grateful for the Urban Tree Festival in hosting us today. We're a big supporter of the festival, and yeah, it's great to be able to talk about ancient trees in the context of urban areas as well, because it's safe to say that for the most part, we've generally recorded more trees outside of urban areas, more sort of in parklands and historic wood pastures and woodlands. As we'll cover in the talk, but it's great to kind of be able to talk about urban areas and have a bit of a call to action. And hopefully after this session, you will be sort of inspired to maybe go and look for some urban trees, maybe record some to the inventory that aren't there. So we're going to look at sort of we're going to look at how to record in this talk. We're going to look at what the Ancient Tree Inventory is. We're going to look at what we mean by ancient and veteran trees and to give some sort of definitions. And I'll also be sharing some examples of ancient and veteran trees that we've already recorded, so you can get an idea of what's out there. So just to briefly introduce the project, for those who don't know, the Ancient Tree Inventory is a citizen science project that originally started as a partnership between the Woodland Trust, the Tree Register, and the Ancient Tree Forum. It was originally started as a project called the Ancient Tree Hunt that since then became the Ancient Tree Inventory. And it's what we describe as a living database of ancient, veteran, and notable trees. So we've currently mapped about 170,000 verified records around the UK. That's in the sort of 16 years that the project's been running. And we have an interactive map of these special trees, which you can browse for yourself. very much encourage you to take a look at the website afterwards and have a look at the map, see what's recorded in your local area. And you might be surprised at what you find. I certainly found this in lockdown, or through the multiple lockdowns we've had, that even trees on my doorstep I didn't know were there, simply because I've been forced to explore, local footpaths, maybe go looking for trees in areas that I wouldn't normally have visited, and you'll be really surprised as to what has already been recorded. But by no means is the inventory complete. The latest research suggests we may only be even 5 to 10% of the way through completion, so there's certainly a lot of scope for recording more trees. Now, it's a citizen science project, which means anyone can add a tree. So the database is built partly by members of the public who submit their records to the website. So as you can see here in sort of step 1, a tree gets recorded as an unverified tree, and it appears as a U icon with a little tree symbol there in grey, so where that red arrow is pointing. So initially it gets recorded as an unverified tree. There's a series of information like data fields that you need to capture, which we'll cover later in the talk. And then once that record has been added, we then have a team of volunteer verifiers who basically curate the database. They visit the trees and they'll decide if those trees are ancient, veteran or notable. They'll also maybe take any extra photographs or double check the species identification, or retake a girth measurement of the tree and make sure that all the sort of details are correct. So they're really important in helping us to create a really robust sort of database. So we really want to make sure that the data is as accurate as possible, so that it can be used for the right things. So that's kind of step 2. And then once a verifier has updated the record online, the tree will then appear as a icon, like a coloured symbol. So it'll also have an A, a V or an N to dictate whether it's ancient, veteran or notable. And at that point, the tree is then visible to everyone on the website, and you can go, like I say, you can go browse our interactive map and see what's been recorded in your local area. And you can use the filters as well. And we've got different layouts on the map where if you click on the road symbol in the top right, you get a drop-down menu and you can change to satellite mode or ordnance survey mode. You can use the filters to search for specific species, or if you just want to show ancient trees, then you can just apply the ancient filter as well. So I would very much encourage you to have a look and play around with that after the talk. So, so what do we record? Well, I've already mentioned those terms, ancient, veteran or notable. It's safe to say that the primary focus of the ancient tree inventory is to record ancient and veteran trees, because it's those trees which are truly irreplaceable and have very high sort of conservation value in terms of the wildlife and habitats and like the ecological benefits they bring, but also from a cultural and a heritage point of view. Ancient and veteran trees are very irreplaceable. And we've got an example on screen, which is the Grantham Oak. So this is the nearest ancient tree to the Grantham head office, which is where the Woodland Trust head office is based. And this tree sits proudly on Belton Lane, and in recent years has gained a lot more sort of local interest in sort of protection measures. You can see it's now actually roped off with mulching, and it's been crowned as our kind of like local famous street tree, and very much respected now. It even has its own signage that has been put together which tells you information about the tree. So this is a great example of how we want to see ancient and veteran trees sort of respected and sort of honoured and valued. So it's a great symbol really for what we want to achieve and what the ancient tree inventory can help us to achieve by mapping, putting these trees on the map and sort of making more people aware really, and yeah, just capturing vital data about them. So I've mentioned ancient and veteran. I thought it'd be useful to make a bit of a distinct sort of comparison between the two. So the chart we've got here shows the kind of typical lifespan of a tree, the different ages and phases of a tree's life. You can see you've got the young phase, the mature phase, and the ancient phase. The ancient phase is basically the third and final stage of a tree's lifespan, and it's an ancient tree is one that has sort of passed maturity. So you can see it's gone past the mature phase where this number 2 symbol is, and it started to hollow out and retrench and start this process of decay. So it's past maturity, it's old, it's aged in comparison with other trees of the same species. It's very important to only compare trees of the same species, and I'll cover exactly why in a few slides' time. But that hopefully helps to define the ancient phase, and it's important to make the comparison with veteran trees, because a veteran tree is one that displays very similar characteristics to an ancient tree, but lacks the great age to be considered truly ancient for its species. So, in other words, it's a tree that might show some of those decay features, such as hollowing, retrenchment, deadwood in the crown, and those trees are more typically going to be within the mature to post-mature sort of category. However, one thing to try and phrase in your mind is that by definition, all ancient trees are veteran, but not all veteran trees are ancient. So in other words, all ancient trees are at least veteran because of their condition. And I guess it's important to distinguish that the term veteran really describes a tree that is of a certain condition. So it's not a life stage in the same way that the ancient phase is a life stage. So remember I said it's the third and final life stage. The term veteran is a bit more complex, because you can in effect have much younger trees that perhaps have only just reached maturity, or maybe even slightly smaller, and they actually show the condition features of an ancient tree, and by definition are veterans. So it's there's certainly ongoing work to kind of develop more guidance on definitions for ancient, veteran, and notable trees, but at the moment that is the kind of the widely accepted definition of ancient, veteran trees. And we'll back this up with some more examples in a moment, but just to give a photographic example of an ancient tree, here's the crouch oak, which was one of the Tree of the Year shortlisted trees in 2020, last year. Here we have a fantastic picture of the tree, and you can see it's a great example of an urban ancient tree. It's right by the roadside, and it fits the description very nicely of an ancient tree. It's got a large girth for its species. It's showing what we call retrenchment, which is where the canopy of the tree starts to die back, and you see more like deadwood in the canopy. Eventually, trees that are retrenching will grow broader rather than taller. So they really start to die back and sort of grow downwards and invest more in their sort of subordinate stems, and those, rather than relying on one main stem. And eventually the tree starts to swell, it starts to hollow, it starts to develop cracks and splits, and hollowing is a really good indicator of ancient trees. It's probably, if you were to pick one single trait to look for in ancient trees, it would probably be stem hollowing. So really, as well, look for those trees that make you go wow. Is a kind of a non-scientific piece of advice. You can imagine as you were driving down this road, there's no way this tree wouldn't catch your attention. And if you find a tree like that, then you should definitely record it. At the moment, we've recorded about 14,500 ancient trees to the Ancient Tree Inventory. Actually, that's quite interesting, because by comparison to veteran trees, we've recorded about 110,000 veterans. So we've recorded significantly more veteran trees than ancients. And that's simply because that definition I described of veterans being it's a condition, not a life stage. It means there's more trees that are likely to fit that definition. And ancient trees, really, there's very few examples or specimens of trees actually make it to being old enough to be considered ancient. So veterans are those that are showing ancient characteristics but are not officially old enough to be ancient for their species, as we mentioned a moment ago. And you can think of them as being survivors. So this tree has clearly had its top completely blown off. However, the tree has survived. That damage has not been detrimental to the tree, and it may even help to accelerate the aging process. So it might be that now there is an opportunity for heart rot fungi to colonize this tree more effectively and speed up that aging and decay process. So veteran trees and ancients, because of their deadwood habitats, they offer huge, enormous opportunities for wildlife, and can be thought of as living ecosystems. Really, they are like little oases for wildlife in themselves, and that's very much why we want to map and protect them. However, in addition to ancient and veteran, we also have notable trees. So these are trees that are perhaps more typically mature trees. They will be locally significant depending on what other species have been recorded in the area. So, for example, not too far from me, we've got a housing estate that's got a massive ash tree growing in the middle. It's all fenced off. It's by no means ancient or veteran, but certainly if that tree was to be felled, then there would be a local outcry because it's a very well sort of respected tree locally. Those are the sorts of trees that we would want to record as notable because they're still significant and can be thought of as like the next generation of veteran trees. So it's very important to protect those trees that might become veteran in the near future if protected. So at the minute, we've got about 50,000 of those recorded to the inventory. So that's an overview of like ancient, veteran, notable trees. But to give an example or a bit of advice on when searching for ancient and veteran trees, I'd say it's best to look for those that show those decaying characteristics and those deadwood habitats. So we already talked about retrenchment, which is something you'll see in the upper canopy. But the best thing to do is to look at the whole tree when you find one and ask yourself whether you can spot any of these features. Can you see woodpecker holes in the branches? Because that's a great indicator of hollowing branches. Some trees are not always visibly hollow, but you can look for these extra clues which indicate that process has started. You might find cavities and water pockets on the tree and dead and hollowing branches that have split off. You might even find decomposer fungi, like heart rot fungi, growing as these large brackets on the side of the trunk and in the canopy too. I've already mentioned hollowing trunk is one of those classic features of ancient and veteran trees to look out for. You're not always going to find trees that are extremely hollowing, but even if you can sort of see that a bit of hollowing is taking place, it might even just be that hollowing is noticeable in the base of the tree. So as these holes that you can see on the image here. Look for trees that have a large girth for their species as well. Bear in mind that they may develop burrs as well as they age, which are going to help to sort of give that impression of a swollen trunk, and in some cases may actually exaggerate the girth of the tree slightly. But yeah, generally you're looking for those. We've got a really good diagram actually coming up that will help show some typical girth sizes for certain species. And also look for fallen deadwood as well, because if trees have been retrenching, then chances are some of those branches will have fallen off, and they might even be there in situ, although in an urban environment, they're more likely to have been cleared away. These are all just some tips and indicators of what to look for. So overall, it's quite surprising because you'd think that by now we would have mapped most of the bigger trees that are out there. That's absolutely not the case. In fact, actually, when I was writing this presentation, this tree came into my inbox, and this is a very large, ancient fragmented ash that you can see has completely hollowed out. You know, there's very little of the original tree remaining. Effectively, you've basically got 2 strips of cambium that are connected via the roots to the ground, and that's enough to keep that tree living. And you can see it's still growing, it's still in leaf. And you know, this is a tree that was recorded in a private garden. So you can see we're very much not at completion. And there are certain environments and areas where we are picking up records quite slowly, and there's still potential to find this at the bottom of your garden. So how you can help us is by recording new trees to the inventory. That would be a massive help. You can also add photographs and comments to existing records as well, though. So if you found a record on the inventory that, you know, needs more information or needs updating, then you can absolutely suggest edits and even add your own photos yourself too. So, but like I say, it's adding new records is something we're still very much in the process of doing, and it's only by working in this citizen science model where members of the public submit their records to us that we can ever hope to build up a wider picture of the UK's ancient tree population. So, stunning example there. So big trees are still being discovered, but actually, you know, there are smaller trees as well, which we'll come on to it in a moment. Some examples of larger trees that have already been recorded. Planes are regularly found in urban environments, on the roadside, in our sort of parks, like urban parks and green spaces. Plane trees are worth a mention because they actually grow very quickly. So you know, you'll often see records that get submitted that are sort of 4.5 to 5 meters in girth, and actually a plane of that size is only likely to be considered a notable tree. It's not likely to be showing many of the sort of veteran features that we already mentioned. But here we have an example of a plane that is veteran. This one is 8.87 meters in girth, so it's a huge tree, and it's, you know, stunning. Like, it's been made into a local feature. Actually, it's sort of fenced off with a flower bed now, where you can see locals have planted it up to really make it a respected specimen. And you know, you'd be surprised what you can find though even in residential areas. Here on the top right, we've got a multi-stemmed veteran oak that's growing, and you can see there's been an attempt here to try and protect the tree slightly as well with some mulching to hopefully and a notice there to say please do not park, because that can have an impact on the root system. So we've also got a veteran sycamore to show you as well on the bottom right. This is a sycamore that was growing in the grounds of a health club. So it just goes to show that actually, you know, our towns and cities can absolutely be home to some of these more, you know, larger and enormous trees. And you know, you can see why these may well have already been recorded to the inventory. However, I think where we might be lacking is those species where, you know, because of the growing habits of that particular species, they don't grow to a large size. Here we've got an example of an apple that's growing down in Havant. This is a veteran apple that's growing on a roadside. Now, you know, how many people must have walked down the pavement or driven along this road and not really realised that this is a veteran apple that is definitely worth recording and is a significant tree. You'll find that it's really a case of getting your eye in for spotting ancient and veteran trees. You know, it's very easy to find trees like this that they will jump out, but trees like this one will be a bit more subtle, I guess, to those who are just starting off with recording. But hopefully this talk will help to sort of give some insights into what to look for. So we mentioned that it's already very important to look for trees that show ancient and veteran characteristics. Here we've got some other examples of smaller trees. that have already been recorded to the inventory. On the top left, we've got what is known as John Evelyn's Mulberry, named after the gardener and writer John Evelyn. This is growing in Sayes Court Park in Deptford. So this is a very historic tree that may well be over 300 years old. So it's definitely ancient. It even has its own plaque, and you can see it's been fenced off. So, you know, looking at it, if you saw that tree and it was not fenced off, and you know there was no plaque to sort of explain that it was ancient, and I'm sure many people would walk past this and not realize that it's over 300 years old. So this is a mulberry, and again, mulberries don't grow to enormous sizes. This one is actually well, it's a multi-stem, so that growth has not been concentrated into a single stem, so it won't have reached that impressive size that some mulberries can reach, because that growth has been spread across the tree and into several stems. It actually appears as a much smaller tree, and very, very easy to miss that. And without the kind of historical reference, you know, this tree may well have been missed. We've got some other interesting examples. Actually, we've got on the right, we've got a veteran silver birch. This is growing, you know, just simply in a strip of grassland outside of a residential area. And again, I'm sure you'd agree, looking at birch, and you may well have not seen many birch that look like this, because birch generally don't live that long. They have shallow root systems. They're prone to falling over, and they're a very short-lived species. Actually, they may be ancient, from sort of 175 years of age, maybe even 150, and they develop this kind of it's not really buttressing, but you get like this fissured, this cracked appearance in the base of the trunk that develops as birch get older. You'll not often see them hollowing out necessarily, but this is quite typical of a veteran birch to see it sort of starting to flute in this way. So there's just a veteran birch, again, simply just growing within a residential area. You know, so many people could have walked past that and not known that it's a veteran, that it's significant for its species. And again, the example on the bottom left is perhaps even more striking. So this is an ancient hawthorn that's growing in Crawley, and it's actually just, you can see the background within a residential area. There's some garages there. This may well be one of the larger ancient hawthorns that we've recorded to the inventory. It's well over 3.5 meters in girth, which is very, very big for a hawthorn. You know, you'd be lucky really with hawthorn to be finding one that's more than 2 meters. Really, that's would be considered a significant tree. So to find one this size, again, growing in an urban environment, it's perhaps one of the few or last places you'd expect to find this tree, and yet there it is. So it's really a case of getting your eye in, and you know, it's worth saying that different species have different life expectancies and growth habits. So you really need to consider the kind of growing conditions that a tree might have experienced as well, and the environmental conditions. We've got a great example of that coming up in a moment, but this table that I'm showing on the screen, this was taken from what's known as Ancient Tree Guide number 4, which is available as a PDF guide online. And it shows the sort of expected girth sizes for maiden trees. So maiden is a single stemmed tree rather than a multi-stem tree. So expected girth sizes for common species. So you can see here that if we take, for example, yew trees, you know, if you found a yew tree that was 8 meters in girth as a maiden, you'd be fairly confident that it was ancient. And for ancient, yew trees need to be a sort of 800 years or more in age to be considered ancient for their species. That's because yews grow incredibly slowly, and it takes them a long time to reach that impressive size. And in fact, some of our longest lived trees in the UK are yews. You know, some may well be over 5,000 years old. Some that are you know, more confidently can be classed as over 2,000 years old. So, you know, to call a yew ancient from 800 years, you know, given that kind of context and perspective, is, yeah, actually it's it's not that old compared to how long yews can potentially live for. However, it's very different for other species. If you compare that with, say, well, hawthorn, which we mentioned in the previous example, hawthorn are fairly short-lived. I mean, they would be ancient from around 175 to 200 years of age. You know, compare that to a yew, and a yew at 200 years would be a young tree. For oak trees, you'd be looking at 400 years plus, typically for an ancient oak. These are not hard sort of age deadlines, if you like, or milestones. It's to give an approximate age, and you'll never really know the true age of a tree unless you know the planting date of it. So this table has helped to interpret sort of expected girth sizes. It's by no means a sort of a concrete sort of tool. You can't, for example, take an oak tree and at 4.5 meters plus say that every 4.5 meter plus oak is ancient. But this is to give an approximate rule of thumb expected size. And remember, these are for maiden trees, and it assumes that they're growing in average conditions. The growing conditions are not to be underestimated in terms of how they can impact the size of a tree. And on this next slide, we've got a fantastic example. So this was the Scotland Tree of the Year winner in 2017. This is the what's known as the Big Tree of Orkney. So very northerly growing conditions. This is a veteran sycamore. Now, if I just maybe skip back a few slides, you can see on the bottom right, there's that veteran sycamore that we'd recorded in Yorkshire. So that's a pretty impressive size. But yet we can also call this veteran sycamore. And the reason for that is because the growing conditions here, you know, if you think sort of a harsher climate, fewer sort of daylight hours, and as well, notwithstanding the perhaps impact of its sort of urban surroundings now, have all had an effect of keeping this tree much smaller. But you can see that there's actually a very big hollow in this tree. So that's exactly what we mean by veteran sort of being a condition rather than a life stage. So it's showing that clear stem hollowing, which is a classic indicator that that tree has naturally started to hollow out. It means that that aging process is well underway. Heart rot fungi have been able to degrade the core heartwood of that tree, and hopefully that sort of that resource has been released back into the tree. There may well be aerial roots that have been able to benefit the tree by reabsorbing those nutrients. As you can see, it's sort of, you know, the sort of soil conditions for this tree now won't necessarily be great, and the tree has to make use of whatever nutrients it can. And so, because trees obviously can't move, one thing they do is they sort of enable this hollowing process, which allows them to benefit from those nutrients that have been locked away in the trunk. So that's a classic indicator of how, you know, veteran trees aren't always going to be big, and definitely have to consider the surroundings, but also how the surroundings may have changed. I mean, this tree was formerly part of a historic walled garden, so you wouldn't have had these buildings here, you wouldn't have had pavement there, and that this was one of 3 surviving trees that were planted at a similar time. But now, of course, this tree has had to withstand, you know, the sort of local development pressures. It now sits within a sort of a concrete jungle, whereas before it would have had more space to grow, and that may well have helped to accelerate the aging process here. But, you know, still a remarkable tree, and one that is, you know, respected locally, and that's exactly what Tree of the Year seeks to do, and certainly what the Ancient Tree Inventory seeks to do as well. Is putting trees like this on the map so that they can be more locally respected. So if we've mentioned about how different species grow to sort of different sizes, have different life expectancies. If you want to find out more about this, you can go on our website. We've got species guides for 11 common species now, and you just click on how to record and go on species guides, and you'll be able to find out more about what the expected sizes are for ancient, veteran, and notable trees for each of these species. I thought it was also worth sharing this slide. So we recently completed our State of Woods and Trees report, where we have a whole chapter about ancient and veteran trees. We analysed the ancient tree inventory data, and we have a field called surrounding status. This basically is captured here, where you can see we've defined surrounding habitat into different categories, and we've got two here that are relevant. So we've got urban green spaces and we've got roadside. And between those two, 11% of ancient and veteran trees recorded to the ancient tree inventory so far can be described as fitting into one of those categories. So that's urban green space and roadside. So that might even include things like domestic gardens, sort of public spaces, parks, village greens, individual urban trees, even churchyards and cemeteries. So 11%. So as I said at the start of the talk, we haven't typically done a lot of recording in urban areas. There certainly has not been a focus to specifically target them. However, what I suppose that raises the question of, does that statistic mean there are a lack of trees in urban areas, or a lack of ancient and veteran trees in urban areas? Or does it mean that there has been a lack of recording in those areas? So as I mentioned at the start, if I was to sort of plan a day of ancient and veteran tree recording, I probably wouldn't think of going to, my local high street, or might not consider going to the grounds of the nearest university, or just walking around a residential area. And I'm sure many other recorders are in that mindset as well. So we actually know that there's bias in the ancient tree inventory data set. Victoria Nolan is a PhD student who has done a fantastic research project that's been published about the ancient tree inventory, which has shown that there are definitely some areas that have been more recorded than others. So I think that's absolutely the case for urban areas. And so just to sort of give some tips as to where you might be likely to find ancient and veteran trees in urban areas, well, it's really about thinking, where are those trees sort of likely to have been retained? So, if you think sort of parks and urban woods, if those are particularly historic parks, where some individual specimen trees might have been retained, certainly might be able to find some good trees there, maybe on the boundaries of the parks as well. Museums and arboretums. So, if the grounds of museums and arboretums have been relatively untouched for many decades, then chances are there could be some like original trees there that could be worth recording. Arboretums can be very useful because often the species are listed. They often even have a tag or a plaque to say what the species is if you're not sure about species ID. And also there might be a good historical record of trees. They might even have a planting date for those trees as well. Schools, colleges and universities. Again, in the case of colleges and universities, there may well be historic grounds that have been relatively untouched, and ancient trees may well have been retained as a feature of the grounds. I went to the University of Nottingham when I was studying, and they have some fantastic veteran trees that have been retained all the way across the estate, and that's simply because of the age of that estate and the age of the university. It's the case of so many universities around the UK that they have very historic origins, and you know, the buildings themselves will be old, and chances are the grounds will also have that same history. So that's why it would be great to maybe have a little project to target university grounds as well, I think, one day, and schools as well. Actually, one of the largest lime trees in the UK is recorded in a school ground. And but of course, you know, permission needs to be sought to record in places like that. So also look at village greens. You know, you'll often sometimes find that there is the local town or village tree that has been sort of locally respected for many years, and may even have sort of fencing and a little plaque sometimes, which is really handy. It helps to sort of give that extra historical context to the tree and helps us to decide if that tree might be ancient or veteran as well. Churchyards and cemeteries are definitely great places, particularly for finding yew trees in churchyards. And there's a great project taking place at the moment called the Beautiful Burial Grounds Project, and that's aiming to try and record more ancient and veteran trees in churchyards to really show off the kind of wildlife value of these sites. So it's those areas that you're perhaps more likely to find ancient and veteran trees in urban areas, but I would definitely say expect the unexpected. As the image on the right shows, you know, you could even find a large veteran sweet chestnut growing in a residential area. We saw that example of the large ancient ash that had been recently recorded in a private garden. And, you know, because they're private, we're really not going to know about the potential of private gardens, because you're reliant on those people discovering the ancient tree inventory and then deciding to record their tree. So very much don't know what the potential of private gardens is. And of course, roadsides as well. These three that are bullet pointed at the bottom are those that perhaps might be trickier to survey, because in the case of roadsides, I certainly know there are lots of trees that I've driven past, but it's absolutely not safe to stop. You know, even if I've been on the motorway or on a busy A road, and you see, you know, an ancient tree on the side of the road, and you think, oh gosh, I can't record that. There's nowhere to stop. So there are those areas that might be harder, but certainly the more accessible areas of urban sites, that particularly those that have more of a historic connection, then absolutely they definitely have potential for ancient and veteran trees. So for this next bit, I just wanted to briefly talk about how you can record to the ancient tree inventory, and then we'll happy to take some questions. First of all, what you'll need to do is visit our website. The link's at the top there, but if you search ancient tree inventory into Google, it'll be the first result that comes up. You'll need to make sure you create an account first. So on the top right, you click on register, and then once you've done that, you'll need to sign in before you can start adding trees. Once you've done so, simply click on add a tree, and it will guide you through a series of pages where you'll be asked to record that information. So if you want to find our interactive map as well, you just click on tree search and it brings up a map. It's actually a good habit to check if the tree is already recorded before you add it, because you don't want to duplicate trees if you can. And also this, just to mention that this website is mobile friendly. So if you've got a smartphone, you can open it in a browser and you can actually add trees straight to it from wherever you are, and use the interactive map from wherever you are as well. So in terms of what you need to record, we've got some information that is absolutely mandatory, that's sort of minimum information. And then we've got some additional information that you can add as well. But what I'd really encourage you to take as a take-home message is, please try and record as much information as you can, and particularly submit photographs, because the more information we can get, the more it helps our verifiers to make that judgment as to whether a tree is ancient or veteran or notable. So yeah, record as much as you can, but particularly you need to include the location of the tree as a 10-figure grid reference ideally, but the map does allow you to plot exactly where you want that tree to be. I'd recommend, if you don't already have it, download one of the grid reference apps onto your phone. There are lots available from either the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. You just type in grid reference app, and there's quite a few. I use one that's called GPS OS, and it gives you a 10-figure grid reference on your phone that you can then add to the record. You need to record the species of tree. You can get that if you can only get down to genus level. So, for example, if you know it's an oak, then by all means just record it as oak. But if you can tell us whether it's a peduncular oak or a sessile oak, then that's also really appreciated. You need to record the girth and the height of girth measurement as well. So you need to make sure that you record the narrowest girth either at or below 1.5 meter height on the trunk. So that's normally about chest height for a lot of people. But you need to make sure that you get the narrowest girth that you can. So on the diagram below, you can see this tree at about 1.5 meter height, it swells. So you would record just below it, just to make sure you get that narrowest girth. You need to record the access status as well. So whether it's on public or private land. And also please do add as many photographs as you can too, because that really helps us to look at the condition of the tree. And it really helps the verifiers when they're trying to find a tree as well to verify it. So this is an overview of the information that you can capture. We've actually got, and to encourage you to look at this in more detail in your own time, we've got a 24-page recording guide which you can download from our website. There's actually some information on how to record on the website itself too. Lots of guidance there that you can read. You just click on our website, click on how to record, and you'll be able to see it there. So I'd really recommend downloading the 24-page PDF. It goes through a lot of the things we talked about today and a lot of step-by-step guidance on how to record a tree and what you need to record. There's even some guidance on things like tree form as well, sort of how to recognize the different shapes that trees take so that you know how to capture that properly. And yeah, here's an overview of the contents page, so you get an idea of what's covered in the recording guide. It goes through each element of the ancient tree inventory process, and yeah, strongly recommend recording that or downloading that, sorry. So just a final thing to say is that I've just published a brand new ancient tree recording form on our website. This is also available in the recording guidance. It's next in the same place as the PDF that I mentioned. And this will guide you through everything you need to record. So you've got all the fields here that match the ancient tree inventory. You just populate that and you can fill it out. You can even add any additional comments. And this is double-sided, so you can actually get up to 16 trees on one bit of paper, which is hopefully what you consider a good day's level of recording if you can get 16 trees in one visit. So I'd strongly recommend you download a copy of that and you can print it at home as well. But that essentially concludes our talk on the ancient tree inventory. Thanks so much for listening, and I've included my details here. So if you want to get in touch with me, it's ancient tree inventory at woodlandtrust.org.uk. That's the project email address which I manage, and I'll be able to pick up any questions that you might have, or if you have any queries about recording, then do let me know. But otherwise, I hope this has been useful, and I hope you want to now go and look for some ancient and veteran trees in urban areas. Like I say, it's an area that we're really lacking records in, and please use all the recording guidance that's available on the website, as that can be printed out. It can help you when you're in the field, and it's just worth briefly making a mention now that we will be having some new videos as well coming towards the end of the year. So please check back on our website, particularly around November, December time, where we hope to have published a brand new series of videos that will hopefully help to explain how to record a tree as well. But I believe this talk will be made available, so if you want to play it back, then by all means you can do so. The best way though is to get out there and start recording trees. Really, it's the best way to learn about ancient trees and how to record them. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and good luck with your tree hunting. I'm happy to take any questions. I believe Greg may well have been filtering some questions for us. Greg, are you okay to hand over to you to...
Yeah, if you come off screen share.
Yes,
I've been copying and pasting the questions. So the first one I think we'll go for came from, where is it? From Felicity Hall, and it's, does a tree being identified as veteran or ancient give it any protection in law?
Yeah, that's a great question. So sadly, at the moment, ancient and veteran trees don't have any formal legal protection just for them being ancient or veteran. Now, some ancient and veteran trees may well have tree preservation orders on them, but again, them being ancient or veteran doesn't automatically qualify them for TPO status, so tree preservation order status. There is of course, the National Planning Policy Framework, which in 2018 was updated. It basically specifies that any development that results in sort of harm or loss of ancient and veteran trees should be avoided unless a compensation strategy exists. But again, this is not law. It's not legally binding. It's advisory. So it strongly advises developers and planners that they should avoid damage to and loss of ancient and veteran trees. But like I say, it's not legally binding. So, you know, obviously the Woodland Trust would be very, very much wanting to see more local, more legal protection for ancient and veteran trees, so that it is illegal to fell them and damage them. But at the moment, it's really just trying to encourage developers and planners to honour the National Planning Policy Framework. And our campaigns team that work at the Woodland Trust that respond to tree under threat cases are able to, or use the ancient tree inventory as a sort of a consultation tool. So they can use it, and if a development has been reported to us as impacting an ancient and veteran tree, then we can potentially make a case for that tree being protected, and we can submit comments against the planning application at that stage, so that any harm can be avoided to the tree. So it's certainly, the ancient tree inventory certainly helps with this, but I do believe it has got a way to go before we see proper legal protection for ancient and veteran trees. That would surely be a win that we'd all like to see.
Yeah,
great question.
I was going to say, I very much agree that ancient and veteran trees should have explicit protection. So from Rihanna, what is the process of becoming an ancient tree verifier?
And another fantastic question as well. So all of our verifiers are trained. So we're actually in the process of developing a brand new training course for our volunteer verifiers, which is taking place as part of the Green Recovery project that we're involved with. So this year, we haven't been doing any active recruitment of verifiers. That's simply because, two things really. One, of course, is the impacts of COVID and has not been able to do face-to-face events to train volunteers. Because normally we would have like a training day where volunteers are invited to come along. We would do like a morning presentation. We'd even look at the Ancient Tree Inventory website as well, because there's some technical information you need to know about using the website as a verifier. And of course, to actually see some trees in person. We've not been able to run that this year because of COVID so far. However, because we're also developing this brand new training course, we also decided that it would make sense to not actively recruit verifiers at this stage, simply because when we have this new training course ready, we'll have a much stronger offer, and we'll be able to roll out that training course to people. However, if there's anyone on the talk that is interested in becoming a verifier, I am putting together a waiting list, so that when we get to 2022, when we've got this brand new training course ready for use, we'll hopefully have a group of people that are then wanting to become verifiers and want to take part in the training. Between then and now, though, I would say one of the best ways to learn about the ancient tree inventory and recording trees is by recording, and anyone can do that. You don't need to be a volunteer verifier to record. I'd certainly suggest that before becoming a verifier, it's really handy if you can have recorded, say, 20 trees, because that will have, by doing so, you would have got that familiarity with the recording process and recognizing ancient and veteran trees. It's quite it can be quite a technical thing to try and classify a tree as ancient and veteran. So that's why having that sort of experience of recording can really benefit, and it will make the training that we put on much more meaningful if you've already got that background knowledge. So I hope that helps to answer the question. If you are interested, like I say, do record some trees in the meantime, and do send me an email to ancienttreeinventory@woodlandtrust.org.uk. I'm more than happy to put you on our waiting list that we have for those wanting to become verifiers. And really appreciate that question. Thank you.
Okay, so this is from Pablo. Can we record trees outside the UK, such as Europe, South America, or Asia?
Now, so traditionally, the Ancient Tree Inventory has been a UK-based project. However, I can see, looking at the map, that, well, we can see where some volunteers have definitely been on holiday, because we have some records in Romania, for example, some in France. Not many. We're talking one or two. There's nothing stopping you recording ancient trees outside of the UK. However, it's not the sole focus of the project at this stage. And when we do any kind of data analysis, it's just worth knowing that those trees are likely to be excluded from that sort of data analysis. However, we want to see ancient and veteran trees really recognised, and who's to say that one day that won't be, more of a global effort. I'd say there's absolutely no harm in plotting a tree onto the map and seeing it respected. It may well even inspire other countries to invest in their own ancient tree inventories as well. And so absolutely, I would say don't hold back. But at the minute, there's no active sort of bit of work to try and record trees overseas.
Okay, great. This one's just coming from Charlie, which I think related to an earlier point. And that's, how do you put a tree forward for the Ancient Tree Award? Or it might be the Tree of the Year Award. I'm not sure if there's one or both, but general
yes,
question.
It's likely to be Tree of the Year Award. Yes. So I think this year things might be being run slightly differently. I'm not 100% up to date with where sort of Tree of the Year is this year. However, in the past, what's happened is there's been like a nominations process. So there'll be, on the Woodland Trust website, people can sort of submit a tree that they think is should be considered for Tree of the Year, and you're asked to submit photographs and to maybe explain the sort of backstory behind the tree, particularly if that tree has a particular heartwarming story, if you like. That can always help in terms of it being nominated for Tree of the Year. This year, I think things might be slightly different, but certainly the Ancient Tree Inventory has the potential to feed into Tree of the Year very nicely. I think the two have very similar ambitions, which is to sort of recognise the importance of individual trees. So I'd say certainly recording to the inventory is a good thing to be doing. And you can actually, when you click on our interactive map, we've got a filter that's called Tree of the Year Shortlisted. So you can actually see which trees were shortlisted for Tree of the Year in the past via the Ancient Tree Inventory website. So do have a look at those. But yeah, sorry, I don't have any concrete information about where Tree of the Year is at this year, I'm afraid.
Okay, so one question, and that's kind of exactly why we wanted to put on this presentation, and that's from Mariam, and that's, can we assume that the trees within most London parks have already been recorded, or are there areas we should head to in order to deliberately find trees that are not on the system, or is it more by chance when we find when we're out and about?
Yeah, the London parks are an interesting one. So you have sites like Richmond Park, for example, which are fairly well recorded. However, actually, we asked someone to do a targeted survey there last year, and they did find other trees that weren't recorded. So you'd think in somewhere like Richmond, which is known to be an ancient tree hotspot, that where you think there'd be lots of recorders, we would have mapped them all by now, but it's not the case. I would say you're more likely to find, I think you're probably more likely to find in parks, it's going to be those areas that are slightly off the beaten track. Obviously, you've got to be careful not to trespass and not damage if there are like protected areas within the parks. But it would certainly be worth looking at, the footpaths around the parks and see, have recorders in the past sort of followed the main loop around the park, or are there any corners of the park that might have been missed? But also, I think it's species as well. So in the case of Richmond, majority of Richmond Park is old oak, but there may well be, old hawthorns, might be old crabapples, there might be old, even like species like willows. You can find in urban parks that are growing sort of along the like water courses that might have been missed because they're away from the main path. But perhaps less so with ancient specimens, but I think you're more likely to find veterans that might have been missed simply because they are smaller in size and may not have been picked up in any sort of site surveys by the park or site owners. Because that definition of veteran, of it being a tree that shows that particular decaying condition, is still one that I think needs wider awareness. So I'd say, whilst some sites may well have been covered pretty well, and when you go on the inventory, it might look like they've been covered well, it's certainly good to go to those sites with an open mind and with a critical eye as well. Just try and think about where trees may have been missed. Are there any corners of the park that someone might not have walked in, or maybe there are certain species that people might not have had at the forefront of their minds, and particularly in the case of Richmond, where people would arguably have been distracted and by all those magnificent oaks, they would have seen that as like, right, we need to record every ancient oak in the park, and they might well have just not had time to record the smaller species. So absolutely going with an open mind.
Great, yeah. I hope you don't mind me adding a little bit onto that as well, as that fruit trees are incredibly under-recorded, and I'm involved in the London group of the Ancient Tree Forum, and we had an email in from someone asking about how to protect and manage a veteran elder tree, and there were very few records, and I was like, well, I don't think I've ever seen a veteran elder or ancient elder, so there's a lot that aren't being recorded. So we've just gone over 1 o'clock. There's two very quick questions, which one was about ivy on trees, which is a very, very, very difficult answer. There is guidance on that, especially on the Woodland Trust and the Ancient Tree Forum websites. Charlie again asked about putting up TPO on a tree you've recorded. You can definitely apply for it. The council may or may not, it depends on the number of factors. But one question I wanted to pass back to Tom as a final question. Again, it's a complicated answer, but what are thoughts to be average growing conditions? Is there a way you could adjust for upland, northern or exposed locations? It might have to be a fairly brief answer if it's possible, because we've just got a little bit over time, but I thought it was quite a good question.
Yeah, no, it is a fantastic question. And it's worth saying that at the moment, the Ancient Tree Guide number 4, which I mentioned, where we saw that girth table, that is being revised. And we've other colleagues at Woodland Trust, we've already started to look at how we could do some data analysis of the ancient tree data, because that original table was produced in 2008. So we're now 12, 13 years on. We've got much more data from around the UK, so much more of a better place now to start doing these sorts of analyses again. My colleague Emma Gilmartin, who's our conservation advisor for trees at the Woodland Trust, she already started briefly doing some analysis to kind of dividing the UK up into different zones and looking at how you could have different expected girth sizes for different species in different areas of the country. Even then, it would still be, it's impossible to account for that truly, because you're not just accounting for the current environmental conditions now. You've also got to consider that throughout the course of a tree's life, if you've got a 400-year-old tree, it may well have experienced very different growing trees that would have affected the rate of growth throughout that period. So for example, a tree may have grown within a woodland setting for the first 200 years of its life. And then the last 200 years, it might have grown in an open grown setting. So even those sorts of things with different light levels and different nutrient availability is all going to affect the growing condition of that tree. So it can be very hard to interpret girth and to kind of have it. I would say don't get too hung up on using girth as an indicator. So there's a rule of thumb, but certainly shouldn't be relied upon as a harsh metric that we should use to try and separate ancient and veteran status. I'd say it's just there as a guideline. But yeah, it's very interesting to think about how we might be able to do that one day. I think more data is really needed to come up with something more concrete.
Okay, so I think we'll have to close questions there, but I wanted to say an absolute huge thank you for Tom. That's a fantastic, fascinating presentation. I'm hoping everybody's taken quite a lot away so they can now go out and record trees in their local area, because London especially is really under-recorded. So we need people out knowing about these trees and how to record them. So huge thank you. Just a quick plug for upcoming Urban Tree Festival events. This Friday lunchtime at 1 p.m, we have another ancient tree event, part of our Tree Rings webinar series about ancient urban trees, where we'll have Peter Coles, who's on this call, talking about ancient mulberry trees of London and the Morris Londinium project, and David Humphreys, who's the tree management officer at Hampstead Heath, talking about the ancient urban trees there. Just posting a link into the chat where you can book on. Check out the festival. Huge thank you to Tom, huge thank you to the Woodland Trust, and huge thank you to everybody who spent their lunchtime with us today. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.